achieved.
Sometimes I'm not 100% sure the UFC does enough to give back to the fans, you know, the people that pay for things, buy tickets, buy pay-per-views, buy Fight Pass, buy the products that they sponsor and put out there, and basically put the money in Dana White and company's pockets. I have an idea, at least some little way that I think I'd be very appreciative if it happened, and I'll tell you about it in a moment. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC 188 event. I'll give you my 5 main card predictions for that card, which takes place on June 13th. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, my idea, and I purchased Fight Pass, and I subscribe to Fight Pass, $10 a month. I think the UFC should go to all Fight Pass members and say, okay, here's the deal. You pay Fight Pass for $10 a month. We're going to give you 1 ticket for a free pay-per-view to be used within the calendar year. So, for example, this weekend, you can cash that in, get UFC 188. If you want to wait and get UFC 190 or UFC 212... that won't happen this year, obviously, but you're able to cash in once a year. I think that would really increase Fight Pass purchasers, and people would see the value in that. Just a thought. I'd like to see them start giving back, or to those long-time pay-per-view purchasers. I know a lot of people out there, I'm aiming at one person specifically who buys almost every pay-per-view. I know for a fact they are long overdue to be giving something for free. Now, and I don't mean free events, I mean thanks for your purchasing all the pay-per-views, here's a pay-per-view on the house. Now, as far as this show is concerned, I'm looking forward to it very much. I'm coming off a pretty decent, I know I only went 7-5 at Fight Night 68, but it was a very solid 7-5. A number of my upset picks, including Ben Rothwell, came through. A number of the closely lined fights I picked came through. I lost a couple of fights. It was pretty cool to see Dan Anderson win, even though it cost me a much more successful 8-4 record. My bet packs produced just shy of $45, 45 units, in winnings. And for the bet packs for this card, you can pay $10 for the UFC 188, or you can pay $22 and get UFC 188, Fight Night 69, and Fight Night 70. So basically, you're saving $8. I think it's a worthwhile investment. I'm taking a little bit more of a moderate approach to making money. Hopefully, it suits what you have in mind. Hopefully, it produces. Last show, it did. Also, check out the prediction panel's picks. We have now 4 experts on the panel, as Ryan Underwood is returning to action. So welcome back, Ryan. Those guys are always fantastic, so you can certainly check out what they have to say. If you don't like what I have to say, that's enough rambling for me. We got 5 predictions. Let's get to the first. Our first main card prediction takes place in the UFC's women's strawweight division as the number 5 ranked Tecia, the Tiny Tornado Torres, undefeated at 5-0, battles the number 15th ranked Angela Overkill Hill, coming in with a record of 2 wins and no losses. Now, both girls are making their second UFC appearance, and both were part of the Ultimate Fighter strawweight tournament. A champion will be crowned, I believe it was coined. That champion no longer standing. Now, Hill came in that tournament ranked 16th, so she was the lowest ranked fighter in the tournament and eliminated in the first round at the hands of eventual winner Carla Esparza. Torres was actually ranked 3rd overall, and she was also ousted in the first round by semifinalist Randa Marcos. But she unfortunately became an injury replacement and got back in, defeated Beck Rollins in the opening round, but then was lost in the second round, but to Carla Esparza. So kind of a crossing of paths there between the two. Had Hill pulled off the upset, they would have met in the second round. Now, the experience on both sides is fairly limited, but the advantage does go to Tecia. She has 5 pro bouts to just 2 for Hill. Plus, she also got 3 opportunities in the Ultimate Fighter compared to just 1. She was 7-0 as an amateur and fought in Invicta exclusively prior to signing with the UFC. And in her Invicta run, she defeated Paige Van Zandt, Rose Namajunas, and Felice Herrig. So a pretty solid list of all top-ranked fighters. Torres, all 5 of her fights have gone the distance. Hill, though, 1 win by TKO and 1 win by decision. Torres is a black belt in karate, taekwondo, and as a BJJ blue belt. Physically, Hill will be 2 inches taller and have a 4-inch reach advantage, but Tecia is a year younger. Skill-wise, Hill has a very solid striking base. She has pretty darn good hands, throws a nice straight right. If she can get a hold of her opponent, she'll control the head and deliver some very solid knees, very accurate knees in close, as well as elbows. She has good forward pressure, and she has a pretty solid work rate, landing 107 significant strikes in her debut. One technique I did see her style she uses, she has a bit of an open guard with her hands, which could allow an opponent to exploit with some quick counters down the middle. With her run in the Ultimate Fighter, she was defeated by Carla Esparza in the opening round, and it came mainly on the ground, which appears to be an area of vulnerability. Emily Kagan, who she fought in her debut, didn't have a ton of success, but the most success she had when she was able to get in and control Hill's body and tie her up, though she was unable to get her to the ground. For Torres, she uses a lot of movement on her feet, attacks in 2 to 3 punch flurries, will lead with the right hand, and she landed 96 strikes in her debut, so that's also a very solid work rate. She doesn't have a heavy kicking game, but you will see her throw the odd one. One thing I don't like with her, though, she can be a little bit too predictable with her attacks and just throwing the same combinations in the same kind of pattern and rhythm, and some lateral movement and good anticipatory skills will throw those off. And I think that's something that we could see Hill anticipate and counter. Torres does have more experience and is the more accomplished fighter overall, but Hill will have the physical advantages. I think she has more power in her strikes, and she's the more diverse striker overall. Additionally, I said the reach with Hill will allow her to see Torres' attacks coming and as a counter or evade them altogether. Torres may try to take this fight to the mat to maybe exploit some of those issues. I don't think she has the game to get her to the ground. Hill is very strong. I think she'll use the clinch, punish failed attempts, and my prediction is a little bit of an upset. I have Angela Hill to defeat Tecia Torres by decision. Fight number 2 takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as Yair El Pantero Rodriguez, 4-1-0, battles Charles Boston Strong Rosa with a current record of 10 wins and 1 loss. Now, Rodriguez is making his first post-Ultimate Fighter Latin America appearance. He did win the show as the featherweight champion. Big question mark about how he will fare and any of the other roster tournament members against competition outside of their season of the show, because it's certainly a big step up from some of the guys they were facing there. He is coming up a 7-month layoff, and there's a big question mark with a young fighter with relatively low level of experience, how he will improve coming off probably the best training sessions of his life. He's also fighting at home, which is a major advantage. And keep in mind, the UFC likes to really book local fighters, and I think he's the only actual Mexican-born fighter on the main card. They like to book local fighters against opposition that they can beat to help build their image and build the market within that region. So you wonder if they see something in Rosa that Rodriguez can capitalize on. Additionally, altitude could favor Rodriguez. He's been living in Mexico City, which is a higher altitude, and that's something Rosa might have to deal with as well. Physically, a 2-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage for Rodriguez as well. Rosa comes in with a 1-1 record in the UFC. He's coming off a submission win in his debut. He's a late replacement, fought Dennis Seaver, lost the fight, but made a good account of himself. And he will have a sizable experience advantage of 11 fights. It's just 5 for his opponent. So stylistically, Rosa, decent and kind of an unorthodox striker. Uses a sideways karate stance, a lot of lead leg kicks, side kicks, stuff he likes to throw out there to really throw his opponents off. He switches stances fairly effectively as well. In his last fight against Soriano, he threw a nice kick and immediately changed levels for a takedown, which is not something you see all the time because it really throws your opponent's point of view off. They're looking to defend the kick, and then boom, you're in on a takedown, which can be very effective. He's a BJJ brown belt with 7 of his 10 wins coming by submission, so he's a fairly diversified fighter. He does have 3 wins by knockout, so all 10 of his wins have come inside the distance. Also watch for him. We saw him catch a lot of kicks against Soriano for takedowns, moves forward with 2 or 3 punch combinations, and initiate the clinch, so a lot of his striking will set up his ground game, which can be a fairly effective weapon if you meld them together. Overall, he appears to be the better scrambler. If Soriano was able to take him down in the last fight, he either countered or swept him, took his back, moved to top position, and if he did attempt something, he had a lot of success regaining the superior position after attempting a submission, or, if Soriano was able to counter him. If he gets put on his back, he will attack. He's got a very active guard, and he will use submissions to sweep out of that position. Rodriguez, his win total, 1 win by knockout, 1 by submission, 2 by decision. His only loss came by knockout. He has a pretty decent kicking game. He'll use side kicks as well to try and create separation, almost to push his opponent off. He kept attempting a standing upward elbow in the last fight, which didn't really land, but could be devastating if it does connect. He will throw some spinning attacks as well, but they tend to be a little bit on the telegraph side. He also tends to be a little bit too over-aggressive and really overextends himself, which could create some issues, especially against a fighter who's looking to take him down. Now, he does have some decent takedowns and showed him against Morales with a body lock, attempted a couple of throws. But keep in mind, Morales is not the greatest fighter on the ground. He's just coming off a submission loss, which was an upset that I predicted at the last show. So, you don't know how well that tells us about his ground game. One thing I did not like about Rodriguez is he tended to give up position quite frequently in that fight, looking for submissions. That's something you can't afford to do against an accomplished grappler like Rosa. I think overall Rosa will get the better of the ground game. He'll dictate the action, plus anything that Rodriguez gives him as far as a positional advantage, he's going to capitalize on. The American is the better striker, and his unorthodox style and ability to switch stances is going to give Rodriguez fits in that area as well. Advantages for the local fighter, though. He's fighting at home. He's returning after the Ultimate Fighter. The altitude is a concern, so those are all things that kind of sit in his corner as positives. But I just think Rosa is the better fighter. He's better at whatever Rodriguez does best, and my prediction is Charles Rosa to defeat Yair Rodriguez by submission. Fight number 3 in the main card takes place in the UFC's middleweight division as Ultimate Fighter champion Kelvin Gastelum, 11-1-0, battles former Strikeforce welterweight champion and UFC middleweight contender Nate the Great Marquardt with a record of 36 wins, 14 losses, and 2 draws. Now, Gastelum is making his return to middleweight after failing to make weight in 2 of his last 3 welterweight bouts. Marquardt is fighting for the 3rd time at 185 pounds since making his return from welterweight, where he dropped down, all that stuff. He submitted James DeHuna in his re-debut in the division, lost to Brad Tavares in his last fight. As I say, Gastelum won the Ultimate Fighter as a middleweight. He seems very focused on returning to welterweight, where he was working his way into the top 10. I think he might have cracked the top 10, but he was right there on the cusp until his last fight, where he lost to Kelvin or Tyron Woodley. Sorry. Now, one thing I'm starting to see is a trend forming where fighters that move up in a weight class are having a lot of success, and it's not as hard on their bodies. They are faster compared to the fighters they're facing, and versus fighters that are cutting down a weight class where the cut is harder, their bodies are inhibited by it, they're facing faster, sometimes more technically sound opponents, and it really seems to give them a lot of trouble. And I'm kind of want to look in to see how that's fared over the last so far this year, and see if there are some statistical numbers that I can provide you with. So far, that trend favors Kelvin Gastelum, who looks to be better fit at welterweight than Marquardt was. Marquardt was cutting down from a natural weight class at middleweight, so I think Gastelum, that certainly favors him. Physically, Marquardt 3 inches taller. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage as well, but keep in mind Kelvin Gastelum is 12 years younger. Gastelum's returning to Mexico, where he does have some connections. He fought there, not in his last win, actually, he submitted Jake Ellenberger. Marquardt also fought Ellenberger at UFC 158, losing by first-round KO, so get MMA math. Gastelum's guaranteed to win this. No, don't throw that crap out. Marquardt, massive experience advantage, though. 49 fights to just 11 for Kelvin. Has submitted more opponents, 16 overall, than Kelvin has faced in his entire career. Keep that in mind as well. For Nate, he's a BJJ black belt. He's incredibly nasty on the ground, but hasn't shown a big focus on his grappling skills. Only one submission win in his last 14 fights, and it was the one against James Tahuna I already mentioned. For Kelvin, a BJJ purple belt. He comes from a wrestling background. He has 2 UFC submissions, 4 submissions overall, and he also won twice in the show by submission, so he's very capable on the mat. But again, I think he'll be hard-pressed to get the better of Nate Marquardt on the mat unless he's able to get top position and really do some damage. Both guys have power. Nate, 9 wins by knockout. His last stoppage coming over Tyron Woodley, so again, another fighter that both men have fought recently, which captured Marquardt the Strikeforce welterweight belt. Kelvin has no knockouts in the UFC, did have one in the Ultimate Fighter, and he averages about half a strike landed per minute more than Marquardt, which is a work advantage, or work rate advantage, I think certainly favors him if this fight goes the distance. Nate in his last fight really looked out of sorts against Brad Tavares. He struggled with his speed and diversity, he was taking a lot of damage, and overall his durability is a question mark, and I don't like that. He does have 3 losses by knockout, he's been submitted twice, and he's 8-9 in fights that go the distance. Those are not good numbers. Kelvin should return to his aggressive form without the impact of the weight cut. He will have a definite speed advantage in this matchup. He needs to be very careful against Nate, especially early on, and if they do go to the mat, because Nate is very capable. I don't like the way Nate's chin holds up under pressure, and my prediction is Kelvin Gastelum to defeat Nate Marquardt by knockout. The co-main event of the evening is in the UFC's lightweight division. Is the number 4 ranked Gilbert El Nino Melendez, 22-4-0. Battles the number 9th ranked Eddie Alvarez, currently holding a record of 25 wins and 4 losses. Now this is a massive fight for both individuals as they look to remain in the elite of the division. They're both coming off losses, and with a new champion, the winner certainly moves closer to an opportunity to fight for that title, despite Melendez's current situation. Now, this bout has been talked about for a long time, and it was wanted earlier in their careers when Melendez was the Strikeforce champion and Alvarez was the Bellator champion. Both guys were considered the top 2 lightweights outside of the UFC, along with Shinya Aoki, who both men actually fought in their respective promotions and both beat handily. Alvarez did lose to Aoki earlier in his career. Melendez, as I said, coming off a submission loss to Perez with the title on the line. He's now lost 2 title shots that he's had in 2 of his 3 UFC fights, and there is the potential coming into this matchup for a post-title fight letdown. But keep in mind, with a new champion that Perez has never faced, it should keep him interested, realizing 2 or 3 wins, and he's right back in the mix. Eddie, lots of pressure coming into his debut, which was against Donald Cerrone. He's had a 10-month layoff after having to pull out of his last bout. And, he ran into a buzzsaw on Cerrone in that matchup, and he was holding his own early, especially one that opening round. Cerrone turned things around a little bit, but, even veterans like Eddie Alvarez are going to struggle a little bit with those octagon jitters. Physically, they're the same height. 4-inch reach advantage, though, for the former Strikeforce champion. Now, Alvarez, skill-wise, has very good boxing and good power. 14 wins by knockout. He works in and out very well, has excellent movement and footwork, has a nice stiff left jab. He will go to the body to set up headshots, so he's a very diversified striker as well. He has some very good short-range punches. We saw him use the collar tie very effectively against Cerrone was able to tie him up and crack him with some very short-range shots. And overall, he can be a technical brawler if he wants to, but he can also just be a very technically oriented striker. His chin is a bit of a question mark. He has just 1 loss by knockout, but we've seen him rocked in several fights. And he can get a little bit over-aggressive and create some openings. And he tends to put his head down a little bit when attacking, which can lead opportunities to get cracked with a knee or an uppercut. In that matchup, Cerrone's kicks and knees certainly turned the fight in his direction, something that Gilbert Melendez really doesn't bring to the table nearly as well as Cowboy does. Now, Gilbert, I give him a slight advantage in wrestling. I think it should be able to dictate the pace, dictate where this fight takes place, but Eddie's very difficult to take down, so it could ultimately be a wash in the end. What Gilbert does effectively, solid left jab. He really rips, punches the body very strong, very well. And he keeps his pressure on, and he will open up and brawl, but he doesn't quite carry the pace that Eddie Alvarez brings to the table. He does come a little bit wider with his strikes when he throws power strikes, which could be counterable by shorter, crisper strikes like what Alvarez uses routinely. If an opponent does try to shoot on him, he will punish them on the takedown attempt, which is something. I don't know if we'll see Eddie Alvarez shooting him for a takedown. It is a possibility. I think Eddie carries a slightly better pace. We saw that against Cerrone, especially early on, where Melendez is a little bit more measured. Melendez certainly can be aggressive, but I like Alvarez to be a little more accurate and carry that pace a little more effectively. There are some defensive lapses in Gilbert's striking arsenal, which can be concerning. He's a little bit too hittable at times. We saw him rocked by Diego Sanchez, a far inferior fighter, and that's something I think Alvarez could exploit, especially if he can force Gilbert to be aggressive and take him out of his comfort zone. Alvarez, I think, is going to look much better in his second UFC appearance. Less nerves, and Melendez is coming off that title fight letdown, so that's certainly an issue that's cost better. Fighters that were supposed to win cost him in that second matchup. Alvarez, I think he's going to outpace Melendez. He was going to use a lot of lateral movement to diffuse that forward pressure, shorter, crisper strikes to counter those wide-ranging strikes I talked about. I think the altitude could favor Alvarez because he keeps himself a little more composed. If Melendez gets a little bit too wild and tries to brawl, I think this is going to be a very entertaining fight. I think it's going to be a very close fight, and my prediction is Eddie Alvarez to pull off the upset and defeat Gilbert Melendez by decision, possibly ending with a split. We move now to the main event of the evening, and it's in the UFC's heavyweight division with the heavyweight title on the line. It's the 13-1-0 champion, Cain Velasquez, battling the #1 contender and interim champion, Fabricio Cavallo Werdum, with a current record of 19 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw. Now, this is a heavyweight title unification bout. Originally set as just a title fight at UFC 180 when these two were supposed to meet. Cain unfortunately pulled out. Marquardt stepped in, and Werdum knocked out Marquardt to capture the interim title. Cain, now coming into this matchup, has been on the shelf for almost 20 months. Since that time, Werdum has fought twice, and injuries have continued to plague Cain Velasquez's run. There's a lot of people saying that if he doesn't fight here, and I know we're only a couple of days away, but anything's possible, he could be stripped of the title altogether. The last time, keep in mind, the last time he came off a longer layoff, which was 13 months before he fought Junior Dos Santos the first time, he got knocked out. There was a lot of pressure to fight in that matchup, and he said he fought hurt. Could be in this fight as well, because a lot of people are criticizing him. Is he going to fight? This is a big match. He's already pulled out of one in Mexico where he's supposed to be a big draw. It's a big issue. Is he coming to this matchup 100%? On the positive side, for Cain, this is his third attempt at title defense, or looking for his third. The first two have been successful attempts. It's the first opponent that he's faced in a long time, not named Dos Santos or Bigfoot Silva. He's fought those two guys over his last 5 fights. The last guy he fought that didn't fit into that category, Brock Lesnar of all people, when he initially captured the title. For Werdum, he seems to be a continual underdog. At least people aren't expecting him to not do so well. The last time he lost, though, was against Alistair Overeem way back in the opening round of the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix. Right before that, he upset Fedor Emelianenko with a pretty darn impressive submission. You look at his current run, upsetting Travis Brown to earn the title shot. He smashed Mike Russo, lit up Roy Nelson on the feet, submitted Big Nog, and he knocked out Mark Hunt, which is a pretty darn impressive run, especially when you throw in submitting Fedor Emelianenko. That's pretty darn impressive altogether. Physically, Werdum, 3 inches taller, same reach. Cain comes in about 10 pounds heavier, depending on what source you're looking at. We'll see if that holds up on weigh-in day. And the champion is 5 years younger than the interim champion. One thing with Cain, though, he does use his size to his advantage. He's very strong, he's very fit, and because he's smaller, he's able to carry a heavier pace. And the altitude overall could favor him if this fight goes longer because he's known for that cardio push, where Werdum, not so much. He has had cardio issues when he's not setting the pace. He looked very good against Roy Nelson in 3 rounds. He looked very good against Travis Brown in 5 rounds. But in those fights, he was dictating the pace, not his opponent. So it's different if his opponent, in this case Cain Velasquez, is pushing him. Cain has fought into the 5th round twice. And carried his pace exceptionally well. Werdum, I believe he's only gone there once, as I said, against Travis Brown. Overall, what Cain's known for, his wrestling, his cardio. He's a very good striker with power. Simply ask JDS or Junior Dos Santos' face. So he's very efficient in different areas. For Werdum, he's a BJ black belt, elite level grappler, and his Muay Thai has come exceptionally far from when he was first considered just a one-dimensional fighter. One big question is Cain Velasquez's wrestling a liability now? Werdum is willing to operate off his back. He does have 9 wins. He tapped out the aforementioned Fedor, he will probably be more than willing to let Cain work on top of him, especially early on when they're dry and they're both fairly fresh. So that's a big question. If Cain looks to take him down, is that going to cost him? If Cain can't wrestle, he showed he can still carry a tremendous pace, a tremendous work rate, and really wear out his opponents. He was on the feet for the most part, busting up Junior Dos Santos in that fight. But again, it was essential that he was able to at least threaten with takedowns and force Junior to defend. What Cain does well, if he can't look for takedowns, work in the clinch, keep attacking, throwing combinations. He's pretty solid leg kicks. You know, I know some of these numbers are generated from his ground output, but 6.1 strikes landed per minute, which is exceptional for a heavyweight, averaging just 1.66 strikes absorbed per minute. So good output, good defense, solid overall. There is that old adage, if you punch a black belt once, he becomes a brown belt, and you punch him again, and so on and so forth. His ability to grapple continues to diminish. It's going to take a lot of punching, I think, to take Werdum's capabilities out of it, but it is possible. You know, I think when the punishment and fatigue begin to set in with Fabricio, he won't be nearly as effective on the mat. Werdum needs to look for a submission early before sweat and fatigue plays a role, and it's harder to pull off that submission. Now, we did see Werdum stand and dismantle Travis Brown on the feet, so he's more than capable of competing there. He lit up Roy Nelson as well. He has a very good kick clinch game, very good knee strikes in that position, good kicks, good combinations. He's quite dangerous. And we did see Cain Velasquez get KO'd by Junior Dos Santos, rocked by Czech Congo a couple times way back in the day. So certainly he is not, you know, impervious to taking damage on the feet. The layoff is concerning for Cain. Werdum continues to defy the odds. We have that BJJ versus wrestling, and Werdum is incredibly crafty and able to pull off a lot of things. The advantage, I think, could almost sit with him in the first half of the fight on the mat if they do go there. But overall, Fabricio's 4-4 in decisions, which isn't overly good. I think the cardio of Cain will play a big role. He needs to be very careful early on. I keep saying that, and I really mean it. Don't write off Fabricio in this fight at all, please. Cain keeps it standing early. I think he forces Werdum to work. I think you're going to see a little bit of butt scooting from the quote-unquote challenger like we saw in the Overeem fight. I think fatigue sets in, and eventually the Cain Velasquez rises to the occasion. And my prediction is Cain Velasquez to defeat Fabricio Werdum by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for the UFC 188 event. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. The prediction panel with Ryan Underwood and company back rolling, so make sure you check that out. The public picks is posted. The bet packs will be available. You can save about $8 if you buy those 3 bet packs for the rest of the month. I had some good success at the last show. And as always, thank you very much for tuning in. We got a whirlwind number of fights coming up, so I got to keep kicking them out. And take care, guys.